Hello, we're Team 13. The title of our project is Biomechanical Device to Induce In Vivo Branchial Plexus Injury in Neonatal Piglet. My name is May and I'm concentrating in biomechanics.
Hi, my name is Parth. I'm also concentrating in biomechanics.
Hello, my name is Aditya Master, and I'm concentrating in biomechanics as well.
Our technical advisors are Dr. Shri and Dr. Singh, and our course instructor is Dr. Sarvar. To start off, the branchial plexus is a network of 5 nerves that innervates from C5 to T1 and controls signals from your spinal cord to your shoulder, arms, and hands. NBPP is a common complication of shoulder dystocia. This occurs as the contact pressure against the baby's anterior shoulder against the mother's pubic bone exceeds a certain threshold. A combination of forces caused by maternal forces and clinician-applied traction leads to overstretching and/or avulsion of the branchial plexus nerves. Currently, the mechanism behind brachial plexus injury is still not fully understood because in vivo experiment cannot be performed in humans due to ethical reasons. Therefore, there is a need to develop a large neonatal animal model to overcome the current research gap. The goal of our end users, who are researchers working in the field, is to be able to perform controlled in vivo stretch of the neck in order to reduce brachial plexus injury in neonatal piglet model. The statistics shows that 2 per 1,000 births in the United States result in brachial plexus injury. Currently, NBPP cannot be predicted or prevented, and therefore our device can help physicians understand the biomechanical properties of the brachial plexus and learn more about the mechanism of brachial plexus injury. Currently, there is only one existing solution, which is a device that uses the passive acceleration method to produce an avulsion brachial plexus injury in rats. The image on the right shows the device that includes a large cylindrical tube where the body of the rat is laid, and as you can see in the image, the forearm of the rat will be placed through the curved tube, and as load is applied, it will push the forearm downward and stretch the brachial plexus. There are 4 main limitations of the existing solution, which our device will address. While the existing device results in complete avulsion of the branchial plexus, our solutions aim to create controlled branchial plexus injury by stretching the neck of the piglet. In addition, this existing device stimulates branchial plexus injury by stretching the forelimb of the rat, which is injury that is more common among adults. Our device, however, aims to induce branchial plexus injury by stretching the neck, which stimulates neonatal branchial plexus injury during birth. Thirdly, while the existing device can only produce nerve stretch of the forearm in the downward direction, our solution will be designed in a way that it can produce nerve stretch at multiple different nerve orientations, such as lateral bending at different angles and longitudinal traction. And lastly, while the existing device induces branchial plexus injury in rats, which are smaller animals with smaller nerve compared to human infants, our device uses neonatal piglet, which are similar in size to human infants and therefore are more suitable physiological model. The objective of our project is to develop a non-invasive biomechanical device that can cause in vivo external neck stretch that will lead to branchial plexus injury in neonatal piglet. The device must be able to do 3 things: allow to laterally bend the neck of the piglet and maintain the achieved position of the neck, control the magnitude and rate of linear traction, and measure the amount of traction force. And it's important to note that while the image on the right displays the forces acting on an infant, our device will replicate lateral bending and traction force on a piglet model. There are 4 project-specific constraints that we must take into account. First, the device can induce only branchial plexus injury and cannot harm the piglet in any other way. Secondly, the device must be able to accommodate different size piglets. And in addition, the device must fit in limited space within the operating room. And lastly, the device must not interfere with surgical setup, such as intubation tube, arterial line, and ECG wires that are connected to the piglet. There are 3 universal constraints that we need to consider as well. The first constraint is that we have only 9 months to deliver the device. In addition, the team will need to purchase material and component with a budget of $500. And lastly, due to COVID-19, in-person meeting and lab access are limited, which may delay or even prevent our validation process. There are four aspects of our project of our design which we've identified certain requirements to meet the user's need. These requirements are based on previous studies conducted that were relevant to the scope of our project, of course. The first aspect is the magnitude of the distance that the neck is stretched and the rate at which this displacement is occurring. The piglet's neck must be able to be stretched up to 100 millimeter, and the rate at which the displacement is occurring must be up to 10 millimeters per second. Next, the traction force causing the displacement must measure a load of up to 250 newtons. Third, the lateral bending in the neck must measure up to 70 degrees of motion, which was identified as the average maximum physiological range of motion in the frontal plane for human infant's neck. And lastly, we should be able to control time data throughout the procedure with acquisition time of up to 10 seconds and sampling rate of at least 1000 hertz.
On this slide, you can see the full 3D design created on Creo. There are several key components to this design. The first component is the base platform, which has an acrylic cover on top of it. This will be used to lay the pig's torso on the platform. Next is a swivel joint, which connects the head platform to the base platform that allows the head platform to swivel and achieve the desired lateral bending required. Underneath the head platform, there will be wheels that allow the head platform to move with the traction force on a frictionless rail system. The actuator will be underneath the head platform, causing the entire head platform to move, thus stretching the neck of the piglet. The force that the actuator is exerting on the pig's neck region will be measured by the load cell as the head platform moves. The head stabilizer will ensure that the force caused by the actuator is isolated to the neck region, preventing the head from slipping out of fixture. Please, please note the fastening system uses strap will be used to fix the torso of the pig to the base platform. The fastening system is not pictured on the 3D design, but will be in the slides ahead. As discussed on the previous slide, the main components can be once again seen here. Base platform, sliding platform. The red arrows indicate the direction, the swivel joint, the protractor, the load cell, head stabilizer, fastening system, and the rails. The protractor will be used to measure the lateral bending angle created as the swivel joint is manipulated. The head stabilizer pictured is different in the build design comprised of the 3D design, but similar in concept. We will utilize the two screws that will fixate the head of the neck of the piglet and prevent the piglet from slipping. The fastening system will be used to secure the torso of the piglet on the base of the platform. Here you see a dummy piglet, and the ruler is for a scale. It's next slide. So here, there are two key differences between our initial 3D design concept shown earlier and our final build. First, the head stabilizer concept in design was to have a spring-loaded system, where the two yellow squares pictured in the figure 8 could move in and out of the neck. To adjust to varying size piglet anatomy, on the right you could see the new head stabilizing system shown previously, which used the screw systems from C-clamps that can be adjusted from different piglet anatomy. The screws are placed at such an angle that it attaches to the bony landmarks in the neck region of the pig. Second, we changed the shape of one of the sides of the head platform from a rectangular shape to a circular shape. As seen in figure 9, the left side of the base platform is circular. This allows for the full 70 degrees of lateral bending to be achieved without any obstruction to the base platform. Next slide. Here's a process flow diagram that can give a high level understanding of our device, how it will function. The end user will input the desired displacement rate and displacement that the device will be run at. The MATLAB will then interact with the Arduino and the motor driver to cause the linear actuator to move based on the inputs. The load cell will then be subjected to the load exerted by the actuator, and the signal will be amplified by the HX711 load cell amplifier to be read by the Arduino. These signals will then output a force versus time graph and a displacement versus time graph for the end user, as well as export the data. So here on the left figure, you see a GUI interface that the user will see. The user can enter a test name, for example, sample1. Next, the forward and the backward buttons can be used to tear could be used to move the actuator forward to come in contact with the load cell. The tear button will then clear the displacement and the load on the load cell. Then the user can input the displacement and the displacement rate, then click on the start button to execute the test. The stop button is there for emergency stop if anything goes wrong. On the right, you could see the result of the test. So you can see the 50 was the input displacement and 10 was the displacement rate. On the graph, you can see load. On the top, you can see load versus time graph, and on the bottom, you can see displacement versus time. So here you see the user first placing the pig's body on the platform, then using the head stabilization system to fasten the head to the sliding platform. Then using the blue strap system to fasten the pig's body to the base platform. Once the pig's body is fastened to the base platform and the sliding platform, the user will then input a lateral bending, then lock the swivel joint so that it can't move anymore. Now on the left side, you see the code actually working now. So the first you enter your test name, sample1. Then on the video, you could see when pushing forward, the actuator is moving forward. Now, once the user is satisfied with the load cell to the actuator contact, they could tear it, then input the displacement rate. Here, the user puts 50 and 10, and they click start. As you can see, the data comes in, and it's graphing. And once desired displacement is achieved, the program will stop. Next slide.
All right, so this gives a quick summary of the components that we'll be performing verification tests on. And a lot of these components were mentioned previously in the design. Just to go over it quickly, the actuator is going to be tested to ensure that the magnitude and rate of displacement is accurate. The load cell is going to be tested to make sure the force is measured correctly. The swivel joint is going to be tested so we can ensure 70 degrees of lateral bending is achieved. And lastly, the MATLAB code will be tested for the load cell and actuator to determine whether we can collect data at a frequency of 1000 hertz. So the linear actuator will exert a traction force and control the displacement and displacement rate of the stretch to the platform that holds the piglet's head. The purpose of this verification test is to test the ability to control the displacement of a magnitude up to 100 millimeters and to test the accuracy of the actuator to move at a specific displacement determined by the user. For this test, we're going to need the actuator, power supply, an Arduino, motor driver, and a ruler. And this test will compare the displacement that the user inputs to the actual displacement. We'll also make sure that the actuator can reach a displacement of 100 millimeters. To perform the test, we input multiple displacement values ranging from 25 to 150 millimeters at various displacement rates to the MATLAB code. Then we measure the actual displacement the actuator traveled after using a ruler. The test will pass if a percent error between the input and measured displacement does not exceed 5% and that the actuator reaches 100 millimeters. So as mentioned, we measured the we measured the displacement at varying displacement rates of 4 to 10 millimeters per second. Because of size restrictions on the slide, we only showed the data for 4, 7, and 10 millimeters per second and its corresponding percent error. So here's the data at 4 millimeters per second, 7 millimeters per second, and 10 millimeters per second. So overall, our average percent error was pretty low, less than 1%. The goal of this test for the displacement rate was to test the ability of the actuator to precisely move at a certain displacement rate based on the user's input. In addition, the actuator must reach a maximum displacement rate of 10 millimeters per second. For this test, we'll need the actuator, power supply, Arduino, motor driver, ruler, and timer. In this test, we'll compare the displacement rate that the user inputs to the actual displacement rate. We will also make sure the actuator can reach a displacement rate of 10 millimeters per second. To perform the test, we input multiple displacement rate values, again, ranging from 4 to 10 millimeters per second to the MATLAB code. We also measured the time it takes for the actuator to travel this. Then we calculated the actual displacement rate of the actuator by taking the displacement and dividing it by the measured time. This test will pass if the percent error between the input and measured displacement rate does not exceed 5%, and the actuator reaches 10 millimeters per second. And here's just a table showing the results from the test. Again, the test performed pretty well. Our average percent error was less than 2%. And again, the load cell is going to be used to measure the traction force that was applied by the actuator onto the piglet's neck. Therefore, this test was to ensure that the load cell is accurately reading the traction force that's being applied. The test procedure required using an MTS machine to apply known loads to the load cell. As the load cell was applied load by the MTS machine, our MATLAB code outputted data that was used to calibrate the load cell. Once an equation was found to calibrate the load cell, we applied known loads from 0 to 250 newtons, going by increments of 25 newtons, and recorded the measurements outputted by MATLAB. The percent error of forces within the range of forces shall not exceed 1%. And this test was actually taken out of ASTM E4-20. So here you can see from the table and the graph that the load cell accurately measured the loads inputted into the MTS machine with basically no percent error. As for lateral bending, as we mentioned, one of our requirements was that the piglet's head should be able to laterally bend up to 70 degrees about the longitudinal axis. Using a mechanical protractor that is embedded into the build of the device, we tested to make sure that the swivel joint could laterally bend up to the 70 degrees in both directions, as shown in the figure on the right. Based on this acceptance criteria, the test passed. And lastly, in order to test whether our data collection system was able to collect data at a frequency of 1,000 hertz, we ran both the actuator and load cell code multiple times, varying the number of data points collected each time. Additionally, using MATLAB, we were able to see how long it took for the software to collect the given number of data points. With this information, we were able to determine the sample rate at which the software was collecting data. So as seen on these tables, the max sampling rate achieved was around 31 hertz, which is far off from the targeted 1,000 hertz requirement. And here's just a table summarizing how our verification test performed and the requirements that we had set out for our device. All our verification tests passed except for the one regarding our data acquisition. And due to the limitations of MATLAB, we're not able to collect data at a rate of 1,000 hertz. We made two major design revisions as we refined the device over the past several months. The first design revision was to use screws from C-clamps as our head stabilizing system. Initially, our plan was to use either straps or a spring-loaded system to stabilize the head. And here's just this example of a C-clamp, and then we used these screws right here and fixated them to the device at an angle. The second design revision was to curve one end of the sliding platform so it didn't get obstructed by the base platform as the lateral bend angle was changed. And again, here's that circular shape that we referenced earlier. One of our main verification testing revisions made was to use an MTS machine to apply known loads to the load cell when doing that verification testing. Initially, we planned on using standard weights on the load cell in order to get the measurements, but the design of the button cell load cell made it difficult to balance weights onto the small point of the cell. So the MTS machine made it easy to concentrate the applied load onto the button of the cell. And just for reference, this button right here is about 2 millimeters wide by 2 millimeters high. So it was really difficult to balance a standard weight on that, and the MTS machine made that much more easier to concentrate the load. So circling back to the innovation and significance of our device, our team created a novel device to perform controlled in vivo stretch to the neck and induce a brachial plexus injury. With the development of this device, clinicians will understand more about the biomechanical properties and injury mechanisms of brachial plexus injury. So we encountered a bunch of challenges when going through this project. Writing and executing the MATLAB code for the actuator and load cell in order to conduct the verification testing was definitely a big obstacle for us, especially given the criticality of these components for our design. Eventually, we were able to overcome this obstacle through a lot of trial and error and outside support. Additionally, because of limitations of MATLAB capabilities, we were unable to achieve the desired 1000 Hertz sampling rate, as mentioned previously, and the maximum sampling rate obtained was around 30 Hertz. Another obstacle faced, especially as we approached the end of our device build, was integrating all the components into one executable code. With that came envisioning the end user's experience of using the device and ensuring operating the device was not burdensome. Through research and online resources, we created a graphical user interface to benefit the end user. Our team has identified 4 revisions that could be implemented in the future to further improve our design. The first revision is to develop a quick release fastening system to secure the piglet's torso to the base platform. The second revision will be to create a better access point to the swivel joint so that the lateral bending angle can be easily adjusted while the piglet is on the platform. The third revision will be to update the GUI created based on any feedback we got from our end user. And lastly, we would want to utilize a different data collection system to collect data at the required 1000 Hertz rate. After researching more into that issue, it was understood that because MATLAB needs to communicate with Arduino when collecting data, it slows down the data collection process significantly. We'd like to say thank you to Dr. Shri and Dr. Singh for their help and guidance throughout this project. Thank you to Girish and Virginia for their support with MTS testing. And last but not least, thank you to Dr. Sarver and Drexel University for their continuing support on our project. Here's our references. Thank you, and we'd like to take any questions.
Hey, we're Team 13, and this is our personal contribution set of slides. My name is Maya Lal, and I'm concentrating in biomechanics and human performance. And my key accomplishments were defining the requirements, material logistics, creating a MATLAB code to control the actuator, and performing verification testing for the actuator. My main challenge was coding and specifically identifying the correct MATLAB functions, getting the actuator to move to a specific location at specific displacement rate, and debugging the code. To overcome the challenge, it involved a lot of trial and errors and looking at similar codes posted on MathWork. My next step career is I'm currently seeking visa-sponsored employment within the medical device industry.
Hi, my name is Parth Hardiker. I'm concentrating in biomechanics and human performance as well. Some of my key accomplishments through this design process was literature review and project definition, material procurement, developing solution pathways, troubleshooting the load cell issues we ran into, and conducting verification testing on the load cell. One of the major challenges that I had for this project was definitely calibrating the load cell. Our load cell was a button load cell, which made things a little more difficult than it needed to be. And also it took me a while to grasp exactly how to get the code to run to calibrate the load cell. So when it came to overcoming the challenge, definitely involved a lot of trial and error with different materials. Had to go through a couple different load cell amplifiers, wiring setup, things like that. Working with people that are better MATLAB coders than me and analyzing the MATLAB code definitely helped a lot. And some support from TAs and of course my team members. My next career step is to work as a engineering consultant in pharmaceutical industry.
Hello everyone, my name is Didier Master and I'm concentrating in biomechanics and human performance as well. Some of my key accomplishments in this project include 3D modeling and printing, mechanical build, created the electrical circuit, assisted with the verification of the actuator and load cell, developed executable file, created a graphical user interface, and performed the data acquisition verification. So some of my challenges include for this project is figuring out the circuit connection. We were using a motor driver that I hadn't worked with before, and there were not many online resources that we could really use, so it was really difficult to figure it out. It was definitely a learning process. Coding challenges include figuring out how to make the GUI. It was really difficult to get all the buttons and all the functions going as we wanted to. Glad that it worked out. Overcoming the challenge, contacting vendors and asking for circuit schematics. Like I said, there wasn't a lot of information available, so it was really hard to find any information or anybody that had any useful information. Yeah, and trial and error. We tried a lot, and we failed. Glad that it all worked out. My next career step include pursuing career in the medical device industry.